Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode number 219, entitled Create Alexa Skills Right Inside of WordPress with Shoutworks. It was published on Thursday the 4th of March 2021. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and just a couple of things before we begin the main podcast. Head over to wpbuilds.com, and over there you'll find the content that we produce in the WordPress space each week. It's a podcast episode every Thursday, that's what you're listening to now, and then on a Monday we create the This Week in WordPress news post. That's a live show, and you can find it at wpbuilds.com/live. We'd love to have you there for the comments. And then we put it out as a newsletter and a podcast and video episode every Tuesday. You can subscribe to keep in touch with all that we do over at wpbuilds.com/subscribe. And whilst you're there, why not find our Facebook group and join that? 2,700 very polite WordPressers. But also, there's a couple of email lists that you could sign up to, and so on. So that's wpbuilds.com/subscribe. If you're in the market for something this week, a WordPress plugin or hosting deal, something like that, you never know. You might find something useful over at wpbuilds.com/deals. It's a searchable, filterable list, and I like to say it's a bit like Black Friday, but every day of the week. Those offers never expire, so they're there all the time. And finally, if you would like to advertise your product or service in front of a WordPress-specific audience, then go to wpbuilds.com/advertise. A bit like Cloudways. Cloudways is a managed cloud hosting platform that ensures simplicity, performance, and security. It offers cloud servers from 5 different cloud providers that you can manage through its intuitive platform. Some of the features include 24/7 support, free migrations, and dedicated firewalls. Find out more at cloudways.com. And A/B split test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time, like in a couple of minutes? Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. Check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okay, let's get on with the main podcast, shall we? As I said right at the top, episode 219 is all about creating Alexa skills, and I'm joined by Christian from Shoutworks to tell us how his plugin will help you to do that. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but you found yourself slowly but surely filling up your house with IoT devices, and especially from people like Apple and Amazon and Google. Well, it turns out that we're now increasingly consuming our content, be that news or whatever it may be, on those devices. They're talking to us, and so can we, in some way, make it so that notifications from things like your latest blog post or a product discount that you've got, so that they come out of that speaker? Well, it turns out that you can. And Christian's here today to explain how you can do all of that. I have to confess, at the beginning it was a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but as the podcast went on, I became more and more convinced that this is possibly the future. I'm sure that voice interfaces will only be growing in the near future, and so, well, it would be useful for us to all know how this kind of thing can be done. I hope that you enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the WP Builds podcast. Thank you for joining us once more. We're at the interview stage this week. I don't know if you listen to this very regularly, but if you do, you know that we do a discussion episode with myself and David Wormsley one week, and then on the alternate week, we do an interview episode. Usually that interview involves the product founder or maybe a CEO of a company, something like that. And today I am literally delving my toes into completely new waters. Prior to having this conversation, we've spoken for about 20 minutes and my ignorance is in abundance here. So I'm going to welcome to the show Christian Petroske. Have I said that right?
You have.
Yay!
It's delightful to be here. Thank you, Nathan.
No, you're very welcome. Christian comes to us from Paris, although he's clearly got an American accent. I know it's not something that we're specifically going to talk about, but you just share your little journey, how you got to be on a podcast today about WordPress. In other words, how did you end up in Paris? How did you end up building things for WordPress? Anything you like. Just give us a bit of a potted history of yourself.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. No, I'm from New York originally. I got the chance to go work and live in Singapore for 2 years. And at the end of that, my girlfriend was moving to Paris for her master's degree. She said, "Come stay with me," and I couldn't refuse that. So I came and met my now co-founder in this business in Shoutworks, a guy named Boudica, who's from Sri Lanka. Great guy, the mastermind behind the technical side of the product of Shoutworks. And we met. We were working on a different business when we came up with this idea, and so we built it maybe about a year ago. The first version came out very first.
Okay, thank you so much. That's really, really interesting. The URL I'm going to mention is shoutworks.com. Let's get that out of the way. It's exactly as you'd imagine. Shout, S-H-O-U-T, works, W-O-R-K-S, no spaces, nothing like that, .com. And over there you're going to find something that I suspect is new to you as well, because we're straying into the world today of home-based interconnected IoT devices. But more particularly, we're straying into the Amazon realm today, because we're going to be talking about a product that we all know and love. Maybe you've got some of these hockey pucks sitting on your shelves. Maybe you've got some of their TV-based devices or some of their screens. Now, just before we start, Christian, am I allowed to say the word on a podcast? You know, the word beginning with A, which is the name of the product, because isn't that the word which triggers it to switch itself on?
Yeah, so if someone is playing it on their device, it might have some trouble. So they've actually released an update recently that is supposed to counteract that. So I think you can say Alexa. Let's test it. Alexa.
Okay, yeah. Alexa.
No?
Alexa.
No? Anyone?
Alexa.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone? Yeah. Over the world, there are a few devices going off. I don't know, but that's good. No, I'm good to know, because I listened to another podcast over on the Twit network called This Week in Google, and they call it Madam A. Because of historically they were right. They've been talking about it for years, and they had quite a lot of complaints from people saying, "You just keep triggering my devices. Will you stop saying it?" So anyway, we've got that out of the way.
Okay,
so,
I like that actually. We can use that.
Madam A. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll forget that. So let's just stick with Alexa and see how we go. So if we go over to the shoutworks.com website, you get to a page which says at the top, the sort of USP is cut through the noise to grow your audience. And the intention here is we've got a WordPress plugin which will enable you to build things inside of Amazon Alexa. Now, before we get into any of this, how it's implemented, how it works, what you do and all of that, I think it would be very important to lay some groundworks here to discuss what Alexa is capable of, what it can do now, because my suspicion is that a lot of people will have these devices, whether it's the Apple equivalent or the Google equivalent, or in this case, the Amazon equivalent. It'll sit there and it'll be used for a very narrow set of things. You know, you've probably got familiar with a set of voice commands that you use which fit your life, but it would appear from the conversation that we had earlier that these capabilities are growing over time. So bit of a broad question, but where are we? What's the state of play? What kind of things are these devices capable of? In other words, why would we want to explore shoutworks.com? What is it doing?
Yeah. So, like you said, if you have one of these devices, whether it's a Google Home or Amazon Alexa or Samsung Bixby now on your phones, if you have a Samsung phone, or Siri, Apple Siri, I know I am constantly using them for timers and asking the weather and saying, okay, because I'm living in Europe, what is this temperature in Fahrenheit or something, right?
Right.
So I think, from when Alexa came out in 2012, they're pretty good at doing very simple things, and I think most people use them just for that. But recently, what has been really cool to watch is that now they've started coming out with games and stories and quizzes and all kinds of fun stuff that you can do on Alexa. And now this is all through your voice. I know that there are occasionally like, that Amazon just came out with an Echo Show, so it's actually got a screen on it to, you can ask it to play YouTube videos and stuff. But for the most part, most people have just only the speaker, right? So it's only with your voice. You can actually play games, right? Like one of my favorite ones recently was this one called Cursed Painting, where you can explore ancient ruins and uncover the secret of the cursed painting to stop the undead curse that's plaguing the kingdom.
Nice.
And all this stuff, right? So yeah, adapted from a board game. But they adapt it to your voice, and it's essentially just a narrator taking you through it, and you get to make choices about what to do next. And
is it like a turn-by-turn game? You tell it what to do, and then it gives you the next set of narration, and then you figure out from where you're at what you want to do next, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Got it.
So you can sort of get the idea of what the logic is behind it, where you have the interface is very different, right? We're used to like seeing stuff on a screen and clicking it and tapping it or whatever. With Alexa, it's very much just like a conversation. And so this is where you can get into like the very advanced conversational design and stuff. But I think the best way to think about it is just like, what we're doing right now. We're just having conversation. I say stuff, you say stuff. What you say affects what I say, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. You see, the use case that I've got for my home devices is basically very, very small in that I will ask it, questions where there is an actual answer. So I'll want to know what the time is in, I don't know, London or something like that, or New York. I might ask it an answer to a question that I'm stumped on my kid's homework. So what is the chemical symbol for such and such? Or what is the square root of such and such? It's extremely good at those kind of things. And so when we connected, and we started having this conversation about we've got a plugin that creates a connection with Amazon's Alexa products. I was really scratching my head thinking, well, what possible use is there for this? And of course, it turns out that I'm consuming content all the time. I play podcast episodes manually, and I listen to those, and I listen to songs, and so I can actually see that immediately after our conversation a few minutes ago where this might be going. You could turn your content from your WordPress website into audible content, but we'll get onto that in a little while if that's all right.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm interested in is what are these things called? You mentioned a name, skills, I believe it was. Is that what we're dealing with? If you want to teach Amazon's Alexa stuff to do something, you have to go through the process of creating skills. Is that right?
That's right. So the way you can think about it is as we have WordPress plugins, right? And the plugins are kind of like apps for WordPress where you can add it to your WordPress and it does all kinds of other stuff. Same thing for Alexa skills. So it's just the name that they give the apps for Alexa, right? And it does all kinds of stuff from Find My Phone to playing podcasts or even like Cursed Painting or playing games or whatever. Right?
Okay,
so wide variety, yeah.
Yeah. So if you were coming to this as an ordinary human being, let's use the example which I often use of my grandmother, who is not very technical, shall we say. Is there an interface? Is there a way to create these skills yourself? So a good example might be, well, let's use WP Builds as an example. If she wanted to have it such that Alexa could play the latest podcast episode from WP Builds, could she build that skill in any kind of UI that Amazon offer, or are we in developer territory? You need to have certain technical skills to pull that one off.
Yeah, it's really in developer territory. Amazon. So the answer is pretty much that you have to be a developer to get it to work the way you want to. Amazon has rolled out something that is a bit experimental. It's called Amazon Blueprints, and they've basically released a bunch of Alexa skill templates where you can go and you can make your own Alexa skill using one of their templates, but they're super limited. It's honestly it was kind of difficult for me to figure out. So I don't know about your grandma. I definitely don't want to. I want to cut her some slack. So maybe she could do it. But we saw that and we were like, okay, we got to make this easier.
Okay, so at the minute, building this sort of stuff is difficult. Okay, so with skills, again, we're staying away from the WordPress plugin side of things at the moment. With skills, what kind of things are available to you? Should you be a developer and you wish to go out and build solutions for Amazon? We'll stay with Amazon because that's where we're at today. What kind of things are available as skills? What kind of on-offable things can you do?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of possibilities for what you can do. I think one of the best places to start might be what are people actually listening to and interacting with Alexa to do? You said a bunch of good stuff, which is weather, music, podcasts, and it's true. Actually, the most popular use cases of Alexa are in those areas. They're utilities like timers, weather, stuff like that. Turn on, off the lights, that kind of stuff. And then there's content, which you can split into music, news, right? And those are by far the biggest use cases of Alexa that are used by the millions and millions of people who have these devices. So I think that's one thing to remember from the outset. Now, there are a lot of, like, if you want to dive in and do some of the more advanced stuff, there's a lot of advanced stuff that you can do if you really commit yourself to it for like months and months, or you want to hire a developer or something, right? You can build really complex, games where it's kind of like a choose your own adventure story, where you can build in like multiple kind of universes into one skill and into one story, where you can kind of have like multiple branching realities that people can choose from. Do you want to make choice A or B? Do you want to go down the left path or the right path? Okay, let's see what's down the right path, right? And then Alexa will take you down there and tell you what's there, right? But I think by far the most used features, or the most used like things, are content and utilities still.
Got it.
And so that's really where the opportunity is for most people who have a blog or a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Because you're putting out all this content here. We were pretty amazed actually by how widespread Alexa alone is, not to mention, Google and Samsung and all these others, Xiaomi and all those others. And that there have been now over 200 million Alexa devices sold.
Whoa.
I believe I have the latest figure. That's nuts. That's a lot of devices.
It really is a lot of devices. And
it's true. Like, it's funny. We were talking, right, how you first got to know Alexa because your parents bought the device. And it was the same thing for me. Like, at the first interaction I had with these devices were when my parents bought them a couple of years ago. And I was like, would you really? You sure you want like Amazon listening in your living room all the time? But it turns out that these things are really, not only are they fun, but they're really useful and very convenient in a lot of ways. And they've been just like adding to it like crazy now. And it's been really exciting to see some of the latest developments.
Let's get into that in a minute, the sort of developments and the numbers and all of that. But again, just harking back to the discussion that we had before we click record, it is such a beguiling interface, because I'm so used to, well, for a start, let's go back 15 years. I'm so used to the keyboard and the screen. And then along comes the laptop with the flat LED display, and you can take it wherever you want in the house, and that suddenly made the computer much more utilitarian. I could use it all over the place. And then go back 8-9 years, and out comes the iPhone, and suddenly I've got this little computing device with me all the time, basically a fully functional computer in my pocket. But it's obstructive to my day, in that I have to give it the eyeball. I have to stop what I'm doing, and I have to look down at it and interact with it. Often, both my hands are engaged, so whatever I'm holding has to be put down. My eyes are engaged, so basically it's fully taken my attention. And in many cases, this is really the last thing I want. I really would like to be able to just sort of talk. And so I found that the speakers in my house are getting a lot of use for just playing things like the news, consuming content in that way. And I think this is great. And I remember just when I was a child, my mother would play the radio constantly, and I would imbibe the news that was going on the radio without having to stop doing anything. You know, my day would continue, and I'd carry on eating my breakfast and so on, and the news would just, by osmosis in a way, it would come in. So I really do feel there's a bright future for these devices, and it's not the internet as we know it. You know, it's not pixels on screens. But I'm just wondering, is that the sort of direction of travel? You mentioned 200 million devices that have been sold, which sounds incredible.
Yeah.
But is it something which is like, what does that curve look like? Does it continue to go up? Is it steady? Do you see this as are we looking at a fad here? Will people get bored of this? Is it going into developing countries? How is it progressing?
Yeah, really good questions. Wow. I feel like, yeah, you touched on the first point, which is that, like, I know at least for me, when I first started kind of getting into the kind of voice world, or Alexa or whatever, I got my Alexa device, and I started using it and started listening to podcasts more. I didn't really realize how much of my time I was spending, like, not looking at a screen, and how much more content I could start to, like, I could start to digest by doing it kind of with audio, right? Where you get the audiobook, you get podcasts, and now I'm like a voracious listener of podcasts, audiobooks. I love them, right? So I think, yeah, it just like drove home for me how much of our lives we spend like not looking at screens, and that, if you're looking from the opposite angle, if you're a creator of content, like those are opportunities, right? That time, that attention, that's an opportunity for you. So that's one thing. And then the next thing is in terms of like, okay, so 200 million, that's a lot. Where is it going? I believe I need to get the exact figure. I don't know the exact number, but I know that smart speaker ownership has been growing between 20 and 30% every year.
Whoa.
And is projected to continue.
Yeah.
So I think now the figure is, at least in the US, more than 1/3 of Americans own a smart speaker of some kind.
Yeah,
it's crossed 1/3, which is nuts.
Truly incredible, the price point that these things can go out. Especially when you're on things like Black Friday, when Amazon and Google, and I don't know about the Apple equivalent, but Amazon and Google seem to be in a price war, and just like $29 for a device, which it might not have the best speaker, but it's functional. It's like a little hockey puck, and it sits there and it totally works. Yeah, I'm exactly like you. I was enormously skeptical. I thought, this is ridiculous. I don't want this thing on in my house listening to everything we say. And then I went through a period of time kind of just not really understanding what it was for. So I'd just ask it kind of goofy questions, like, how do you say this in Chinese? What's the capital of, I don't know, some Mongolia or something like that. And then eventually you sort of settle into a swing. You get into the stuff that you want to ask it. And in my case, it's, okay, I've just woken up, and I say the words which trigger the Google device, and I ask it to play the news, and it dutifully plays the news for me. And that's now part of my day. It's just every day this happens. And as time goes on, I'm becoming more and more familiar with it and what it's capable of. And it's almost like, no, I don't want to say these words, but it's almost like a sort of benign kind of Alfred out of Batman. It just kind of sits there in the background and is helpful when you need it. It's amazing.
Right. That is definitely the goal, I think. Although I would be careful with what you ask, because one time I have cats, right? I found a purring cat Alexa skill. So you open this Alexa skill and it starts like purring like a cat, and then your cats are supposed to like, respond.
Yeah.
And so now all it recommends me is cat skills.
Okay.
So careful what you wish for.
Yeah, careful what you wish for. Okay, so really interesting. So we've established that it works. We've established that it's growing. So it seems to be that people are consuming content in this way. Just to your point earlier about audiobooks as well, and I was, again, talking to you earlier, I was given the choice today. I really wanted to buy a book today. I've been meaning to get it for a little while and decided finally to make the purchase today. And there I was, either going to put it on my Kindle and read it or buy the audiobook, and I instantly shelled out 4 times the cost of the Kindle ebook in order to have the audio version, because I just know that I can dip into content when I'm doing things like making breakfast, or even, like mowing the lawn, whatever it might be. All of that stuff is available to me, whereas the book, same reason, I got to sit down and read it. Now, I kind of almost these days view consuming audiobooks as reading. I know that people will find the word reading contentious there, but in a sense, everything is the same. My eyeballs aren't engaged, but the consumption of the content is the same. And actually, for me, the way my brain seems to process things, the audio just sticks better than the text version. So
no, that's a great point too, actually, is the accessibility piece, which I don't think we talk about enough. But it's really true. Like there are tons of people out there who are either like find reading difficult for whatever reason, whether it's dyslexia or something else, like just find it like very difficult to sit down and read long books, but they still want to learn, they still want to get the information, right? And so they need an audio version, right? And so there have been a bunch of apps that have come up, but so this is just like one other way that, like if you have a blog, for instance, you can plug in Shoutworks, and now your blog is available on Alexa, right?
Yeah.
That now people like that can now gain access. So that's just one side point.
No, that's great.
Important.
I've just got one more sort of technical-ish question, and then we'll get into what your plugin actually does and how it works and all that. So first thing is, are we looking at a future here of complete siloed ecosystems? In other words, is there any interoperability between the Amazon ecosystem, the Google ecosystem, in the same way that it required something like Zapier to come along to help us combine all of these different platforms? You've got Google Sheets over there, and you've got email over here, and you've got Basecamp and Slack, and getting them to communicate is virtually impossible without a third party. Are we facing that problem, or is there some kind of interoperability? In other words, in the future, will you be able to set this one thing up and it will be available on all these IoT home style devices?
Yeah, really good question. So I think in the coming years, there's going to be a lot of tension and excitement about this question, because it is still an open question, whether we've got a bunch of big competitors. In the US, it's Alexa and Google Home, but then in the rest of the world, Xiaomi is like almost the biggest one. I think it might be their smart speaker might be the biggest one, and then Samsung, okay, they're in there too, but it's true. It would be a pain if you had to like switch completely, if you decided to switch, right? You have to, I have to buy a new TV. Are you kidding me? Right? So what actually this year, all of the big smart speaker makers and voice assistant makers have signed an interoperability initiative for the very first time. So it's actually a very timely question. They've just signed a big thing that says, okay, we agree to a set of standards, or we will agree to a set of standards when we make them, to make it possible for people to buy, TVs. When you buy a new TV, you can choose whether you have Alexa or Google Home on it.
Okay.
Right? So that if you want to change, you don't have to throw out all your.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing that we're unfamiliar with. As an example, I have an Android phone. My kids, they've got the Apple equivalent, and there's just literally no interoperability there. They're totally separate ecosystems. But we manage somehow to get data from one to the other. I don't quite know how. It's always a bit of a muddle, but. And the Mac OS doesn't really do too well, when we're trying to do things on the Windows platform and so on. They're just separate, and maybe we're going to have to accommodate those. But yeah, it would be lovely to think that there were open standards for these kind of skills, as they're called. Okay.
But like you said, on the service level, on the business level, let's say I have an app for studying, right? Yep. Called there's one that I've used in the past called Quizlet. Okay, that's a popular app for studying.
Yep.
If I'm using that app on my iPhone and then I want to switch over to an Android, I can still sign into the same account, right? And get my study data or whatever on that different device. So I think that will persist. And for us, like in our roadmap, we plan to build stuff for Google Chrome as well. So in the future, you'll be able to click one button and publish to both places.
Nice.
but we're not there yet.
Right, well,
But,
I'll scrub that question off. That was going to come later.
oh yeah, okay, there you go.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that will continue. I think.
Okay, the very final technical question is: do we need some kind of Amazon account? Do we need to have some kind of authentication from the Amazon end to be building these skills?
So with Shoutworks, no.
Mm-hmm.
You used to with all the other options out there, you have to have an Amazon developer account specifically. You have to go to create it and all this stuff. We don't require you to do that because we built it in a way where it's branded by you, it's your skill, but we're running everything through our Amazon developer account. But what it means is that you can just worry about just pressing publish in the Shoutworks interface. We can make it as nice as we want to. We don't have to worry about Amazon, and neither do you. And you can have your skill up and published on the Amazon store without having to go through how to become an Amazon developer and all this going through this kind of weird interface that they've built for that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's really nice. Okay, let's get stuck into the plugin itself. So there's a WordPress plugin. That's why we're talking today primarily. Okay, let's imagine we all know how to install a WordPress plugin and activate it. That's a fair assumption, I would think, with the audience that we've got. What happens next? What are we doing? What is this creating? How do we interact with it? Forget the use case of it. Forget what we might wish to do on the other end. Literally, what are we doing? What buttons are we pressing? What does the interface feel like, look like?
Yeah, totally. I appreciate this challenge to describe a
it's
visual
really
interface
difficult.
in my voice. I feel like this is very on brand. But so your two big goals after you install the Shoutworks plugin is, number one, you have to get your plugin out there, right? You have to publish it. Sorry, I said plugin. You have to get your Alexa skill out there and published on the Amazon Alexa skill store so that people with Alexa devices can access it. They can say, Alexa, open WP Builds podcast, and then your podcast will start to play through your Alexa skill, right? So that's number one. Number two is actually figuring out how to get people to use it, right? And there are two ways for that. We can talk about that later. So first things first, when you get into Shoutworks, you set up, you see a bunch of tabs in front of you, and you go one by one, left to right. So the first one is you tell Alexa how to introduce you, right? So that's the first thing that she says. You say, Alexa, open WP Builds podcast. She says, welcome to WP Builds podcast. And then she gives a description of the podcast, right? She says,
but I write that. That's
right. And you write it. Exactly. Nice. You write it and Alexa will speak it. So kind of like she's an actress, you give her the script, right? And she'll say it. It's like Meryl Streep, you say, Meryl Streep, here's your script, and she'll speak the lines, right?
I've got to ask, right?
Yeah.
If this is on your developer account,
yeah.
Have you had any abuse of that? Have you had people putting in inflammatory, politically incorrect things which Amazon might flag as problematic?
No, actually, because we haven't had anything too crazy. Amazon does have a review process. So what happens next after you customize your Alexa skill and you give it all of the things that you want in it, you say, okay, say this and play this podcast, and then you're done, right? And you're ready to publish it. Then you can test it yourself first. You can hear how it sounds. But then when you press publish, we actually run this set of advanced algorithms that basically it's basically like an automated Alexa developer, and we send your Alexa skill off to Amazon for review.
Got it.
They will take between 1 and 4 days to review it. Actual people sit down and review it, mostly in India because of what the messages that we've gotten actually, I think. But actual people will review it. And then when they look at it, they everything is working, everything is fine, nothing is, like you said, nothing is violating whatever rules they have.
Yeah.
Then they will publish it.
Got it.
But sometimes they will push it back and say, hey, this is bad, or this part doesn't work, or whatever, right? So that was kind of our challenge in creating this whole thing.
I'm
but
sorry.
Right now,
yeah,
as long as there's no violating content, then it'll go through.
Yeah,
So,
this is great. Music to my ears. This is I'm really enjoying this conversation. This is such a new world to me. So I interrupted you. You were on tab number 1, introducing how Alexa introduces your podcast. Maybe you finished that bit. If in that case, that's fine. But if you wanted to carry on, keep going. Yeah.
Thank you. No worries. Yeah. No. So then after you put in how she wants to introduce you, how you want her to introduce you, then you get to the fun part, which is where we have 6 sections, 6 categories. 4 of those categories are actually completely customizable text to speech. So you put in the script, you write in the script, or you copy paste it from wherever you want, and Alexa will read it out, kind of like she's the actress reading the script, right? Reading the lines that you give her. And one of those is your blog, actually, in your WordPress site. So when you download Shoutworks, your blog is automatically connected to your Alexa skill, and Alexa can narrate your blog posts. So that's just out of the gate, that's done. If you don't want her to include your blog, you can uncheck it and it's not there. It's not included in your Alexa skills, so that's fine. But you get 4 of those, right? So you can customize them however you want. You can say, this is a science podcast, so let's do trees weekly. Let's talk about like one tree every week, and we'll talk about the science of that particular species of tree, right? Okay, cool. Or you can decide, you know what, I really want to boost sales for my candles that I make for my e-commerce store. We're going to do a deal of the day. And every day I'm going to run a different promotion to sell more candles, right? For one candle that I'm selling. You can say every day you can set a new deal of the day that says, 10% off the Christmas time scent candle for today. And then tomorrow it will be something else and something else after that, right?
Yep.
And what's cool with WordPress is you can actually schedule these ahead of time because they're all posts in WordPress, right? So you can same functionality you get with a WordPress post you're publishing to your blog, you can get with these little pieces of content that you're sending to Alexa. So that's the 4 kind of text to speech sections or categories in your Alexa skill. The other 2 are really cool. One is your podcast. You put in your podcast link and Alexa will play your podcast. And the second one is Alexa notifications. So this is where you can actually write a custom message, click send, and all the people who have subscribed to your Alexa skill will get their Alexa device will light up and make a noise. And basically when the owner of that Alexa device says, hey, Alexa, what are my notifications? She'll say, you have one notification from WP Builds. There's a new episode up, right? You can announce whatever you want. And one use case that we've seen has been really powerful of this is announcing sales, announcing flash sales.
Nice.
So you can drive a ton of revenue in a very short period of time because you're literally popping into someone's living room saying, hey, 20% off for the next 3 hours only, and watch the traffic go up on your site, right? And watch the sales come in. So that's been a really powerful and cool one to watch. It's this notifications feature.
The first 4 are much more sort of obvious, aren't they? In that you mentioned that they're basically text, and it just reads that text out, which is great. And then you've got the podcast one, which is just amazing how that I didn't know that existed. That's so cool. And then the last one, the notification one. Just a bit of clarification on the notification one. Is there a limitation? Obviously, because notifications is designed to be a kind of a carrot dangling to lure you into the main content, not to the content itself. Is there a limitation in the notification one in terms of, I don't know, the character count or the amount of time it consumes to say the actual words? In other words, I can't put the first volume of Shakespeare's works as a notification.
Probably not smart to do. No. It's tweet size. So it's 280 characters, I believe. Yeah, 280 characters.
Oh, because I can just imagine the abuse of that notification system. It just becomes like an advertising channel. I'm predicting that over time Amazon is going to have to address abuse of that notification system. But that's absolutely amazing. I didn't even know that there was a notification system in there at all. Maybe there is in my Google devices, but I've not allowed it to have access to anything particularly personal, like my calendar or anything like that. So it doesn't know that I've got meetings today, because we share them in the house, and I don't really want my kids being bored by notifications about my about what's going on in my calendar during the day.
All your meetings.
Yeah, but
meeting, Dad. Yeah,
but Amazon has that additional thing, which I don't think. Oh, maybe it does. I mean, my Google devices have a little series of lights on the top. It's like 4 little dots. Whereas I know the Alexa has kind of like a blue circle which pulses, doesn't it, in some way? So it's much more sort of visual as to, look, I've got something that I want to tell you about. Yeah.
And it'll stay red for the next like 2 days if you don't look at it. So it's there, and people look at it, and the open rate, the rate of people actually reading and listening to the notification that you put in there is insane. It's so high. It's like above 90% in our tests.
Wow.
There's no other public information on this because, like you said, it's really not that common yet. And as a result, I think, you get these sort of, email is super saturated. You get one of these very undersaturated channels where now you can reach your audience, you can reach people all of a sudden that you couldn't do before. I think the some of the first people to use it and really understand how to use it well are going to profit big time.
Yeah,
and then
that's
a bunch of people will come in and ruin it.
Yeah, I mean that's of course a concern, isn't it? Is that 2 years from now, it's inevitable, right? If a marketing channel works, it's going to get abused, or at least it's going to get oversaturated. But maybe, like anything, you can stamp your authority right at the beginning of these. You hear about YouTubers who've just been doing it forever, and their audience has just grown over time because they got in early. The content isn't necessarily any different to anybody else's, but they've just been there longer. And the same could be true here. I sort of wonder slightly about the whole, how to describe it. I want to say SEO because I've got no other words for it. Like the SEO of surfacing your stuff so that people subscribe to it. So obviously everybody on the web, on a device like a computer or a phone, is familiar with, you type in a search query and out come the Google SERPs in most cases, and you've got a laundry list. Usually people look at the first few. We know how that works, and the game is to get in the first couple of positions. Ideally, you're in the first position for that search. When voice searches are returned, my presumption is that there's obviously a 1 maybe or 2. So how does that work? Like, let's say, for example, somebody didn't know WP Builds, but they were interested in WordPress podcasts. Well, there's dozens of those. How do we get our podcast, or whatever it might be, your car dealership or your shoe shop or whatever it might be? How do you get those messages for Alexa to view them favorably and mention them at the top?
Yeah, so great question. This is the big question of how does anyone know I'm on Alexa, right?
Right.
And generally, I give 2 responses to this. One is you tell them through your marketing channels, whatever. Whenever you're telling someone, hey, listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, now you can add this. You can say, and we're on Alexa, right? So that's one. The second way is what you're alluding to, which is this kind of SEO level of stuff, which is it's actually discovery, right? People will discover you through whatever channels they're discovering Alexa skills through. And there are 2 ways there. So there's I'm asking Alexa something and she's going to recommend something to me. And then there's the Alexa app, which all Alexa users have downloaded on their phone. And that has a little recommended skills section on the app.
Got it.
You can search and look at skills that way. So for when Alexa recommends skills when you're speaking, there's a rule of thumb that is not confirmed by Amazon, but that has been tested by creators, and we think this is the case, which is that when because what's weird about Alexa, it's not like a domain name where I own shoutworks.com. You can't have shoutworks.com, right?
Right.
You own wpbuilds.com. I can't have wpbuilds.com.
Right.
On Alexa, you can actually have 2 WP Builds podcast skills.
Yeah.
Right. And Alexa will choose the one that's the most popular.
Got it.
And the one that gets the best ratings. So what this means in practice, generally speaking, is that, okay, she's trying to give the best experience to the user. So she's going for the one that's got the highest ratings, the most uses, right? But what it means for you is that you have an incentive to try and like be the most popular one
Yeah.
as soon as you possibly can,
Yeah.
right? And I think now is really the time to do it because, I think there are now over 100,000 Alexa skills on Alexa. This is a figure from Amazon, and that sounds like a lot. But remember, it was really early days of like the iPhone when there were only 100,000 apps for the iPhone. Now I believe there's like millions and millions,
there's like
right?
48 trillion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just nowhere near the same maturity in terms
Yeah.
of the ecosystem. So if you wanted to be the WordPress podcast that Alexa recommends, I think we could potentially make that happen.
This is so interesting. It's like the
Yeah.
wild, wild west, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
the frontier of something new, and you
Exactly.
just hope it doesn't go in the way that you can imagine. Just massive competition for this one space. Because at least with search engine optimization for SERPs in browsers, that you've got a chance. You can watch yourself crawling up. You can see the benefit of what you're doing. Whereas this is, well, okay, if you're in the app and you're searching and you've got a laundry list of things and you can pick the right skill, the WP build skill or whatever, amongst the other WordPress podcasts, that's fine. But if you're just doing it audibly and you don't come out number one, there's no way of really seeing where you would have come out. Are you second?
Yeah.
Are you like 48th? What's
Yeah.
what's the game here? It's fascinating.
Yeah, she will. She will. If you don't like a suggestion, you can say, she'll give you a yes or no question. Do you want to use this one? You can say no, and then she'll give you another suggestion. But past the top like 2 or 3 suggestions, you're kind of toast.
Yeah.
Like with Google, at least you get to page through all these pages of results, right? With Alexa, it's really just 3 options that she'll give you, maybe 4, and then that's it, right?
I've just thought of another question.
Yeah,
On Google, obviously a significant proportion of their revenue, well, used to, I'm sure it doesn't anymore, but it used to come through paid advertising. Can you pay your way to the top of search in Alexa?
You cannot.
No.
You cannot
Good.
just yet, but you can bet they're working on that. I know
God
that they're working
darn.
on that. They will not. They will not announce it for another couple of years, but
Yeah.
they're definitely working on it.
Yeah, there's got to be a clever way of them sneaking that in, but they'd have to be very careful to make sure that we say, okay, this is a sponsored post or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's really interesting. Are there any situations like current customers of Shoutworks that you've seen them do something and you just think that's ingenious, that's such a good use of our platform, I'm so pleased we've got that client, I can now, it's almost like testimonials that you've seen of people using what you produce?
Yeah, it's been really cool to see. I think we've started to become really popular among a couple of groups that I didn't expect. One is financial blogs. And it kind of tracks. I think, I think the reason for that is that they have a lot of content. It's up to the minute, so you want to know kind of what's going on recently. And it's kind of a need to know thing. You just want to get the information. Like, I don't know, if you've listened to your Google Home like speak to you for a long period of time, it's like it's not the best narrator, right? You'd rather have a human kind of speaking rather than the robotic kind of voice of Alexa. It's getting better, but still not as great as a human. But finance, I think, is one of those areas where you just got to know, right? So you don't mind the delivery,
right?
You just want the information. And so I think that's one that kind of surprised us. And we've got a few financial blogs out there that are putting out information every day and seeing a lot more, seeing the audience grow, which is exciting. One that I didn't expect was a it's like a real estate blog where they teach Australians how to invest in U.S. property.
Okay.
So that one was cool to see. I feel like and they give like a tip every day, right, on how to invest in the U.S. and these are the things to avoid, and this, like, it's just your standard blog stuff, right?
Yeah.
We've had some really interesting podcasts on there. The MakerPad podcast, one of my personal favorites, which is a podcast. I hopefully it's not terrible to plug another podcast.
Oh no, please do. Yeah.
It's like it's for the no code tool community.
Yeah. Yeah. The
That's pretty cool.
makers. The makers. Yeah.
Right, the makers, yes. But yeah, I think, there's, like I said, one thing I was really excited to see was people using the notifications for flash sales, which is like nuts. That to me is super cool.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It is a completely new world to me, and it
Yeah.
really does feel like we're on the beginning of something. And obviously, they're combining the screen now with the audio. You've got these. In the case of Google, it's called Nest Hub Max or something like that, I think. And Amazon, I don't know what their equivalent is, but there's a screen attached to the speaker. And so, who knows? We might be able to combine both things. Just occurred to me. Is this a custom post type, or can we bolt this onto any post that we're already creating in WordPress? So as an example, WP Build, to put these, the podcast episodes it's just a post. I mean, it could have been a custom post type, but actually, as it happens, I'm just using the WordPress posts. Can we do that? Can we write text in a regular old post and somehow Alexa enable it?
Yeah, so if you like in the standard blog section, the post section that ships with every WordPress site is actually included in your Alexa skill by default.
Great.
So every post that you write there is included. Now, we've actually had this request for a feature where you can decide, oh, I want this specific post to be in, but I don't want this other post to be in. We don't have that yet, but maybe that will come soon.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, in terms of adding, you can also add new post types where you can add, instead of having your blog section, you can also have, like I said, trees weekly or deal of the day. Or
the sky is literally the limit. Okay, so that is that's basically the same feature, just bundled in a different way, isn't it? Rather than a checkbox in a post, you have a custom post type which you rely on. Yeah, I mean that's fine. That works. Exactly. Okay, that's absolutely fascinating. It just occurred to me that we haven't talked about the thing that always needs to be talked about, which is pricing. So there is a pricing page. If you go over to shoutworks.com/plans-and-pricing, so plans and pricing, or there's a link at the top. It's just called pricing. You can tell us what it is. Now, caveat.
Yes.
We are recording this, as always. We record these things a few weeks in advance, so if you decide to change your pricing, so be it, but this is what it is the day we're recording it.
Right, so I can actually announce that we probably, by the time this airs, our price will have gone up, but right now, as of recording, it's $9.99 a month.
Nice.
So just under $10 a month for all the features, and so far unlimited notifications, which is pretty nuts. We just haven't got around to building a limit in yet. So
get in while you can. That's great.
And then, but we plan on in a couple of weeks bringing it up to $19.99 a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very, very likely by the time that you listen to this, it will have been $19.99, and I will have got it at $9.99. So
that's right. There you go.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, I feel that every question that I want to ask has been asked, but as we always do at the end of these podcast episodes, did I miss anything? Is there something that you would have liked me to have asked that you wanted to get across?
Good question. I think this whole world is pretty new, and even I have been like constantly learning new stuff about Alexa, about voice, about how they should work. Why this should be a part of your marketing. It may not be apparent at first. So one thing I will plug is that we've got a free mini course up on the site where you can learn how to generate leads and make money through Alexa. And there are a bunch of ways. Actually, one thing we didn't talk about too is the Alexa developer rewards, which are now open to not just developers, but everyone. For Amazon, when your Alexa skill gets popular enough, they have this incentive scheme where they will actually pay you a monthly check if your Alexa skill is one of the top Alexa skills in your category.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. Yeah. Okay.
And through Shoutworks, we pass it on to our creators. So that's all contained in the mini course, which you can find on the website, on the homepage. You can find a link to it.
Okay.
from Shoutworks.com.
Well, honestly, a really different episode, something entirely new, a totally new emerging area. I just can't see this shrinking. I can only see this growing. So really an amazingly, apropos, perfect to have you on talking about it today. So one last time, shoutworks.com, you can go and check it out and see if there's anything in here for you. Christian, thanks so much for enlightening us about Amazon and IoT devices and all of that. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
Well, no, thank you for the conversation. It's been wonderful. Thanks, Nathan.
No worries. As I said at the top of the show, a really interesting subject, something that I wasn't really familiar with, but I can well see that in the near future we'll all be talking to our websites, certainly talking to things online, consuming news this way, perhaps consuming podcasts this way, perhaps consuming blog posts this way. And so wouldn't it be nice if we could notify people when we had new content for them to consume? And that's what Shoutworks allows you to do. Go and check out the podcast. If you've got some opinions on this, go and leave them in the show notes. You can do that on the podcast episode at wpbuilds.com, or head over to our Facebook group, wpbuilds.com/Facebook, and over there you can comment. Find the thread for this particular episode. It was number 219. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by Cloudways. Cloudways is a managed cloud hosting platform that ensures simplicity, performance, and security. It offers cloud servers from 5 different cloud providers that you can manage through its intuitive platform. Some of the features include 24/7 support, free migrations, and dedicated firewalls. Go check it out for yourself at cloudways.com. And A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split test in record time? The new A/B split test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything with anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okie dokie, we will be back this time next week, only next week, because we're on the 2-week cycle. Next week it'll be a discussion with David Wormsley and I as we chat through our A to Z of WordPress. I have no idea what letter we'll be on, but we'll be on a letter of the alphabet. And then in a couple of weeks, on a Thursday, we'll have another interview for you. Also, join us live this week in WordPress, 2 p.m. UK time in our Facebook group or wpbuilds.com/live, and you can join in the comments with some notable WordPress guests. Between now and then, I hope you stay safe. Have a good week. Bye-bye for now.